You ever wonder why contractors hate installing these breakers? We're going to talk about it. First off, one of the most hated things, requests from the inspector, they'll say install a combination arc fault breaker. Newsflash, they are all combination arc faults. What he really means is install a dual function breaker or a dual purpose breaker. In this case, this dual purpose is arc fault and ground fault protection. You can see here that the combination arc fault is separate from the ground fault protection. It's sensing two different types of faults. That's what makes it a combination arc fault breaker. Not because it also has GFCI. So dual function is the proper terminology when you want a breaker that does arc fault and GFCI protection. Where would you be required to install these? Let's look at that. We're going to keep this video short and to the point, but basically if you're in an attic, if you're in a bathroom, if you are outside, or if you're in a garage, you are not required to install these breakers. A new update to the code will require GFCI in the attic for refrigeration equipment. That's another story. But that would kind of be the only stupid exception. One reason why you would have to install a breaker instead of a standard GFCI device would be the reason here. It says here you must test GFCIs at least once a month. If your GFCI device is not readily accessible, the owners of the business can be held liable for not making sure that these things are able to be tested monthly. And that's where installing a standard device comes into play, and installing a GFCI breaker or dual function breaker becomes mandatory. Also mandatory for the areas we listed above or earlier. Not in a bathroom, not in a garage, outside, or attic. So that's two reasons to hate these. One, the inspectors asked for the wrong thing, and then it confuses the contractor. And then two, they're just 5 times the price of a standard breaker. So you load your whole panel up with these, and for what? Sometimes they don't even work. I'm sure we've all experienced that by now. They nuisance trip. Let's talk about why they nuisance trip. If we have a light and we have our breaker and we feed the light with a hot here and we return it with a neutral here, and this is the breaker, and as the light pulls the load, it generates, let's say it has an amp, and then it comes back and that amp is circulating in this circuit. This thing stays happy because everything is the same. Now, what can happen, I'm sure you've heard of shared neutrals, especially in like three-way switches, and things just get convoluted in houses. What happens if we have a separate hot but we shared our neutrals is that you're going to introduce the extra amperage from the light from the other room on the neutral side, and you're not introducing it on the hot side. So now you wind up with 1 amp coming in on the hot, and then you added just on the neutral side, because this was fed from a separate breaker here. This is a separate breaker. You've added an extra amp here on the neutral, and then all of a sudden this thing sees an extra number. Then that breaker turns off. That can absolutely happen. It happens all the time. Another requirement would be anytime that you install a replacement device. If you install a new receptacle under a permit, it's the inspector's responsibility to make sure that you install arc fault protection on those receptacles. Also, if you extend a circuit more than 6 feet, you have to arc fault protect that new circuit. So if you located a panel, we've moved the panel 6 feet away, 10 feet away, we've installed all arc faults through the panel with existing wiring. You see where I'm getting at? This can get very frustrating. What's more frustrating is when you load the breaker up, the panel up with all these breakers. You got about 20 breakers that are $50 to $70 each in the panel. You've cost the homeowner, you've installed them, you take them out of the package. They work for one day, and then you go over here to this scenario where everything was good while you were testing, but then the homeowner started turning on different appliances in different parts of their house, and now all of a sudden we're introducing extra amperage on circuits we didn't know about, and now these things start to trip. But it gets better, because I got a story for you. It gets even better. Did you know these have firmware? These are programmable. Take a note, Gen 2, Gen 1, all these are date codes. They program these things to ignore more and more faults. I've talked to the reps on the phone. They told me what date code to buy specifically to ignore a certain fault for a certain treadmill. What else are they programming in these? Are they programming these things to ignore all the faults and then maybe just the really bad ones, to where they do the same thing as a breaker. Who even knows? We don't even know what they're programmed to do. It's all a big secret. And I'm not trying to start a conspiracy here, but it's got to make you wonder. With all the different codes that they push trying to sell more and more crap for us to mandate. Now we got controlled receptacles where you got to have a permanently etched receptacle from the factory that says controlled on it. You can't just install a regular receptacle and label it. Surge is now a requirement. There's a bunch of requirements coming out of the woodwork. This has been in effect since close to 2008, and it's just getting worse out there. So that's why contractors hate these, because there's a lot of questions about them. They're really not open and transparent with what software and what they're programmed to ignore until you have an issue and you call. And yeah, sure, they work, but they also do nuisance strip, and it's electronics. Everything electronic tends to fail at some point. And then you got to go buy another one of these or hire somebody to replace it for you. So if you find yourself that you need another one of these, what you do, you land this on the common ground bar or neutral bar depending on the orientation of your panel. If you're a sub panel, you're going to land this on your neutral bar. If you're at the service and that's your main to your house, this is going to go on your ground bar / neutral bar. The neutral for the circuit along with the hot is going to land on this breaker. So the neutral for that circuit goes here, the hot for the other side of that circuit would go there. And then it plugs into your bus bar here to power it. Do they work? Yeah, these things work. I had a scenario where somebody wanted me to switch one of these out for a standard breaker. I did my diligence, did my troubleshooting, found that the receptacle, once I got to it, was almost falling apart in my hands, and this thing was actually probably saving their house from burning down. These are good, but I do have a lot of questions about them, and they can be kind of complicated. It really is a love-hate relationship. We're kind of stuck with them. They do work, and they do save lives. They do save houses. But man, they are confusing for contractors to get right. The combination dual function thing really throws people off, and then they fail from time to time. Let me know what you hate about these in the comments below. I've listed off all my gripes. At the end of the day, I still think that they are good. I haven't said that they're not necessary or that they shouldn't be around. They should be around. They do work good. But yeah, like I said before, they're just irritating, and that's my thoughts on that. If you found this helpful, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one. Before you go, since you guys stayed around, I'm going to show you a really valuable tip. And we're going to do it on the cardboard. Let's say you've got a used breaker and you want to pawn it off as a new one. Just bump the bottom of the breaker there and it will lock into the trip position. So be aware, I used to think this, if you go to the supply house and you see this breaker's tripped, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been tripped from the factory and tested. They could have been dropped. And the pawning the thing off as a new one was a joke. Don't do that. But yeah, if you're in the supply house and you want to make sure that you got a new breaker from the factory, keep in mind that that trip symbol there may not mean that it was tested from the factory. Just a fun fact. See you guys later.